good, guys? It is Reed and welcome back to another video. Today we got episode 6 of how to make your magic better. Now, I've honestly been really enjoying doing these videos lately, getting to sit down, talk a bit more about the theory of magic. So how to make your magic better is where I sit down and talk to you guys about some of the more important things that are often overlooked in our magic, but things that are more important than the tricks and the methods and the sleights and those sort of things that you kind of see all over YouTube. So this is episode 6, and today's episode we're going to dive into routine building. Now, this was suggested to me by Exploring Space, and I thought it was a great idea, so I really appreciate that, buddy. Thanks for the idea, because this is going to be a great video. I got a lot to say. Routine building is very important. If you're interested in creating your own routines and stuff like that, it can be tricky to do. So I do want to give you guys some tips on how you can do that yourself, how to go about it, and how to create good routines, because it is important and it's not the easiest thing to do. I want to thank everyone who's came along and subscribed recently. The channel continues to grow at a good pace, and we're really getting close to that 1,000, and I have a cool giveaway planned. I think it's going to be pretty fun. Also, I'm planning on filming a few more behind the screens episodes, the series where I perform magic on Omegle and then reveal how it's done behind the screens. So I have a couple new ideas for that I'm hopefully going to film in about a month or so. So, that video will be coming back. And yeah, otherwise, I got a lot of cool ideas that I want to continue working on besides more tutorials. But let's dive into this video, how to make your magic better, episode 6, routine building. So what is routine building? Well, routines are essentially a structure of tricks, or a structure of a trick, you could say. I would almost consider, a multi-phased trick sort of a mini routine, and you want to approach it in the same way that you would if you were constructing a set or a routine that involves several tricks, right? So it's the idea of how that trick is going to be structured, what is going to follow what, how you're going to get from one trick to the next smoothly, how you're going to be able to, make it happen. It's about when and what you should perform, in what order, and this is all very important because we want to give our audience an incremental build as we perform. And you don't want to have the high peak early on and then the rest just fall flat because you've hit that high peak so early on. So these are the things that to me fall under routine building, and a lot of pros spend a lot of time on this aspect of magic, and people who do it as more of a hobby or whatnot, it's there's not a lot of tips out there on how you can do it. But even if you're just performing for your friends and your family and you're doing a few tricks back to back, some of these ideas in routine building you want to keep in mind because they are important. As a quick anecdote, I can think of a few times back in the day where I had done a trick really strong, usually tricks that hit really strong, like maybe it was like a torn and restored, I think I did. And so what happened was I was performing, one of the first few tricks I did was super strong. It was a torn and restored, and the people were so floored. They loved it. It was amazing. And I went into my next few tricks and I realized all they kept talking about was that torn and restored trick. And the tricks were going well and they thought they were cool, but all they kept asking is for me to do that again, or asking me how I did that. And they just were so focused on that, and it took away from what I was continuing to do. And no matter what I did, I wasn't able to top that. And so the engagement of the audience was way lower. So those are some, things that have happened to me in the past, and you learn from it and you figure out, you can't just start super strong all the time because it'll actually go to your detriment. You want to, if you start off with your strongest material, I should say. So now, why is routine building important? There's a lot of reasons. The main reason that I would say is so you can have that proper build up in your either trick. If you're doing a multi-phase trick, you don't want to start with the best phase and end with the worst phase, right? Or if you are performing a little set or a couple tricks back to back, usually you want to end with the sort of best trick, your best material usually, right? Like I kind of said before, you don't want to have any letdown moments when you're performing. So if we look at sort of a graph to people's engagement versus sort of the excitement of your tricks, what happens is as you're performing and you're performing better and better tricks, people's excitement, engagement, expectations all begin to rise, right? But you have to maintain that. And every time you raise the bar, you have to maintain or exceed that bar for the engagement to remain where it is. The second you start to fall below that bar is when people start to care less because they figure you've hit your peak. I mean, this goes to anything in life. If you think about your peak in life, they say you never want to peak in high school, because if you peak up there, then the rest is downhill. And it's kind of the same thing. As you're raising that bar, each time you have to either meet that or exceed it to continue to have people engaged in what you're doing, and to avoid those letdown moments where the trick is just not, even if it's a good trick, it just won't be as good. It won't hit as hard because they've seen something more amazing, right? It's also important because you do want to finish strong. Finishing strong is how people will remember you. It's what they will remember. The last thing that you did is always how people will remember you. And so if that's tied in with the most amazing thing, you have a perfect sort of memory that will never be forgotten. And it's a great way, like especially if you're trying to get more work, or even if you're just performing for fun, it's a great way to have people remember you. Fluidity is another reason it's important. You want the tricks to flow into one another. You don't want to take out a deck of cards, do a card trick, take out a coin, do a coin trick, then have to put the coin back, take the box back out, do another card trick. Like, these are sort of things you want to think about as well when you're building your routine. You want tricks to have some sort of flow. Sometimes one trick will set up for another trick, and you do those ones back to back because it's a perfect moment, right? I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second here. And another big point to hit home is that audience retention. So if you don't structure your routines or your sets or your tricks properly, you will have trouble keeping people engaged, and your magic just won't make that much sense. So how to build routines. So I'm going to give you a couple tips here and a lot of the ideas that I use, and tell you what's important to keep in mind. So I like to start with an analogy here. There's a lot of things in life that we can relate to routine building. I remember back in high school in English class, they used to teach us when you're writing an essay, right? And you have your three main points of your thesis. You want to finish with your strongest point, right? Because that's what people will remember. That's what you end off with. Start with your second best point, because that's what's going to capture the attention and get people right off the bat. And then if your weakest point kind of fits in the middle there. And I think this isn't a bad strategy to adopt as well as in Magic. Also, like relay races, typically your fastest, if you're doing a relay race, the fastest guy is the anchor at the end, right? He's going to run at the very last to make up any lost time. The next fastest guy is going to go first to get you that head start, and the slower people will be in the middle. And that's a good sort of philosophy for this. Specifically, if we're talking about routines and sets, this applies. You want to finish with your strongest material. Start your first trick with your opener. You want it to captivate, so you want that to be very strong. And then the other stuff is the good stuff in the middle, right? But your strongest finish, your next strongest starts, and then the rest goes in the middle. That's typically a really great sort of formula to fall into, and it works really well. Here's what I would do, right? I start doing this. Let's talk about a set, building a set first, and then we'll talk about building a trick. So if I'm putting together a set, right, I'm going to do a gig and I want to decide what I'm going to perform, okay? I will think about the environment that I'm going to be in, because some tricks you just can't do in certain environments, right? Will I have a table? Will I not have a table? Will I be surrounded? Will I not be surrounded? All those things. Do I want to do card tricks, mentalism, whatever it happens to be? Then I'll go through my lists, my effects, and I'll write down everything that I could do based on the circumstances, right? Some I'll just eliminate because I don't want to do it, but everything that I want to do and that I could do based on the circumstances. And then you have this list. Then you go through the list and you can start cutting things out for whatever reason. This isn't that good. This is similar to that. Cut things out. And then then the next step, you want to go through that list and pick the strongest 2 or 3 tricks, put them at the end. You kind of want to narrow it down out of those sort of tricks and pick which one's going to be your big hit home final moment. Sometimes I find, if you do a torn and restored and then you do like angle 0, those are both really, really strong and they always hit, and those are always some of my finishers. Is going to be angle 0, torn and restored, somewhere in there. The problem if I do one of those and then the other is that having two they don't compound. Like the results of angle 0 and then me performing a torn and restored don't give me twice the results. It kind of still gives me the same amount. It almost becomes a waste. I would rather perform one really well and then save the other one for another time, because maybe I'll have this group again, or I can do it later on, or maybe that's what I'll start with, right? So you kind of want to narrow down those top tricks maybe to one, and that'll be your closer. Then you could take the other one of those tricks, move them to the beginning, or find your other strong tricks and compile them at the beginning and go through those and decide what's the best for this environment, what's the best for if I have sort of a theme, and what'll just hit really well with the specific audience. Sometimes you can get insight into what your audience will like and what they will enjoy, and you can finish with that, right? Or start with that. So then you have your opener, you have your closer, and then you want to figure out, oh, how long do I have? How many tricks am I going to be able to fit in? And you sort of narrow things down based on all these different factors I've talked about, and those will kind of fill in the rest. Now, in terms of the order of the ones in the middle, you do want to keep things in mind. I would, if you're doing card tricks and coin tricks, don't really mix them up. I would do the card tricks first and then the coin tricks, or vice versa, because you don't really want to be pulling out this, pulling out that, right? And if your strong end closer is with cards, then maybe the second half of your set should be with cards so you can lead into that, right? So these are just sort of things to think about. You want to look at setup, right? I don't do a ton of tricks that require much setup, but if I do, then I'm going to think about that. I often love to just start. If I'm going to do anything with a stack, that'll be my opener. A lot of times stack work is really, really strong. So like, for example, my variation of shuffleboard, and I think shuffleboard's a really, really strong trick and can be a great opener. I'm gonna teach my variation of shuffleboard. It's a little bit more modern, the presentation. And so I open with that often because I can have the deck set up and I just take it out, do a few false shuffles. It still looks like all the cards are mixed, but it is set up. So then I can do shuffleboard, and then from there I can have everyone else shuffle, and it doesn't matter. So again, I don't do much with stacks, but if I do, I usually open with it if it's strong enough. But if not, you need to think like, oh, if I have to do a deck switch, how am I going to work that in, right? So maybe if you have a trick where for some reason the card's going to be examined for a while, while they're examining that, that's when you can do your deck switch. So you sequence that trick right after. Maybe you have the situation that one trick sets up the stack or for the next trick, and so you can do those back to back. There are some tricks that are similar concepts, but maybe one's stronger than the other. So you can do one as like an intro to the concept, and then one as the closer. If it's like a prediction style thing, or like, oh, you're gonna go with the influence. I'm gonna influence you. You can have. I like to do that, like mini sets within. So I'll do like a little quick mentalism set where I'll do 2 little mentalism tricks back to back, and I'll have the same theme, like, oh, I'm going to show you how I can influence you. The first one, maybe I'll just force a card and whatever, really easy, and the next one I'll go into like star sign divination or passcode divination or something like that. So you can kind of build that way, right? So there are a lot of ways that you can sequence these, and my favorite, I'll give you a quick rundown of usually what I do. If you want to follow this, pick my strongest trick, throw it at the end. Next strongest trick that requires some kind of setup will be my opener, okay? And then I'll do a card set, so maybe 3 card tricks that I tend to have some sort of theme, whether it's I'm going to show you 3 different ways I can find a card, I'm going to show you 3 different ways I can influence you, 3 different ways, whatever, and I'll do those 3 tricks, and I'll pick 3 tricks that fit that, and then I'll sequence them from the strongest or least strongest to the strongest. So again, I'm still ending the card set with the strongest one, right? It's all sequential, right? And then I'll go into my mentalism set, do 3 mentalism tricks once again, starting with something smaller, moving up, and then finishing with a big mentalism hit, and then circle back with my closer, right? So that's typically how I structure my sets. And those are the things you want to think about. You want to keep in mind time as well, how much time you'll have when you do this. So now let's talk about tricks, how to routine tricks, because tricks are slightly different, and I think the philosophy is a little bit different. So what am I talking about? Well, let's say we take a plot like ambitious card. The phases of your ambitious card you can look at as a routine, and structuring those phases are important. I think everyone should have their own variation of the classics. I don't yes, there are versions that people have that are so well known because they're so great and everyone does them, but I always think you should try to put your own spin on it. So maybe take the strong phase from that one that everyone loves, like in the ambitious card, the one where you bend the card and they can see it pop to the top. That's super popular, and take that. I think it's great. Use it in your routine, but don't do the other things that go with that routine. Take from here, take from there, and create your own routine. So when you do that, you got to decide how to structure things, right? So it's basically the same process, except with this, I wouldn't necessarily say that you definitely want to finish with your strongest. I don't know if you want to open with your next strongest. I would say just go sequential order from least to strongest for most tricks. Once in a while, maybe you'd want to do something really visual to get the attention of the trick, but then the second part's going to be underwhelming compared to it. So with tricks, I tend to just do it in a nice sequence, starting with the least impressive phase and moving up to the strongest phase. You know, typically 3 is a good number of phases to have for your card routine, and here is what I always strive to do, right? Of course, this is a loose sort of guide, but this is what I like to do. Phase 1 is the explanatory phase. So I'm explaining very clearly what's going to happen throughout this trick, and I show a very simple but clean version of it. So in my ambitious card, my opening phase is I'll usually get the signed card and I'll take it here, I'll leave it in the middle of the deck, and it'll come to the top, right? So that's phase 1. Phase 2, we want to add some convincers. This is the convincing phase, because in phase 1 they saw it once, so they're going to be like, wow, let me see that again, right? So now we want to add some convincers. So, for example, great one in ambitious card is to let them see that card once you've placed it in the middle, because that might be the first thing where their brain goes, oh, that's maybe how he did it, right? So we want to start to add convincers and take down the walls of some of the ideas that they might have as methods, if that makes sense. So the next thing I like to do is I'll do bow to stern control, because now I can show the card in the middle, push it in, and it comes back to the top. And that builds on the first phase and adds some convincers. So I always like to try to add convincing moments in my second phase, and it always makes it stronger than the first phase. And then the third phase is when, in almost every trick that has phases that I do, I try to make the magic happen in their hands. I think that's basically the strongest thing you can do, is when the magic happens in their hands, and it's 99% of the time going to be the strongest of all your phases if they can feel it or hold it or whatever. So for ambitious card, you know, maybe I'll do a top change, get a double here, right? And I'll say, hold your hand out for me, and I'll do the drop switch, place the card in their hand, they'll feel the card change, and it'll come over here, right? So that's just a very rough example, but that, you know, I don't do ambitious card a whole lot, but when I do, it does kind of end up like that. The first phase will be something quick, second phase, a more convincing control, you know, with some convincers, and then the last one will end it. And you can apply that form work to everything. I would try to, you know, have your first one as the intro and really explain what's going to happen. The second one builds on that, adds convincers, and the third one, the magic happens in their hands. That is my little secret on creating tricks that I like to go with. You really want to take the perspective of the audience when you do this. Sit back and think, what are they experiencing? What's the effect? Forget about the method, think about the effect. What would be stronger if I was seeing this happen for real? Think of it as real magic. So for the ambitious card, let's go back to that. If someone takes a card and face down, puts it in the deck and pushes it in, and it actually does come to the top, like think of what you're doing as actually happening, and imagine how that would feel to you. That would be cool, but you might suspect the card wasn't the card they said it was. So then now you're going to want to show that card go into the middle of the deck, right? And then imagine it came to the top again for real, with real magic. That would be even more impressive. And now they give you the card, you put it in your hand, you snap, and it ends up on the top of the deck, and it's not in your hand anymore. If that were to really happen through magic and you were to really witness that, that would be amazing. That would be the most amazing out of all of those. And the reason I say to think of it as real magic is because as magicians, it's hard for us to visualize an effect because we always know the method. So if you can forget method, just think about the effect and imagine that it was actually happening, that someone actually had magical powers and they were doing this in front of you. What would be the most amazing? And then you can sequence yours in that way. The only time method would come into play is if, again, it requires a stack or some kind of setup, then you're probably going to want to open with that, you know, and if things feed into one another, then you're going to want to do them back to back, stuff like that. It's good to think about what goes well together and pair those things up if, like I said, if one sets up for another. So let's talk about some examples that I can give you guys about routine building. So we'll start with a trick that I bring up a lot in this series called the gambler. I've done a variation of it in Sleight Off episode 3. I've performed it in my Omegle Magic videos. The gambler is my go-to gambling routine that I perform. And here is the phases. I believe it's 4 phases. So phase 1, I let them shuffle, and then they name how many players are at the poker table, and they pick who they want to win, and I basically deal that person all 4 aces from a shuffled deck. So super impressive, starts super strong. They're like, what the heck? That's crazy, that's awesome for card tuning. So in this trick, I kind of start strong, finish really strong, and the other stuff goes in the middle just because of how it works out. Because this is a little bit more of a routine rather than a phase trick. You know, it's not the same thing happening over and over. So then next I talk about the cut Now the cut is one of the hardest things to beat, because after you can do all this special shuffling, but then someone still has to cut the deck and ruin all that. So then I'll go in and put the 4 aces on top and do a Madison shift, cut them into the middle, and the aces will quickly come back to the top, and it's pretty amazing. And then I stick on this sort of idea of the cut for a while, and then I say, well, in a real game, I wouldn't be cutting the cards, someone else would, so I let them cut the aces into the middle, and I show them that the aces are in the middle. So again, I'm upping it, I'm adding some convincers, I show them the aces are in the middle, close up the deck, and they're on top again. And then the final phase, again, the magic is happening in their hands. So like I said, this is like, I'm not making this stuff up, this is what I use, guys. So, and then I'll do I'll take the 4, let's say, aces, push them into the middle, and I'll give them one little overhand shuffle, just like this, and I'll give them the deck, and I'll say, in that action, if I did it right, I should have been able to stack those 4 aces to exactly where I want them. I'll have them deal out a hand of poker, and I will get all 4 aces, even though they're the ones dealing. So that's when the magic happens in their hand. So, like I said, this works so well because the intro is super strong, and then the middle has a theme and it flows, and phase 1 is a nice simple cut control. Phase 2 is a more complicated one with more convincers, it's stronger, and then the last one hits hard, the magic happens in their hands. And I love the Gambler. So that is an idea of me really putting to practice these tips that I'm giving you guys. Another one is oil and water. My oil and water is a combination of a few other people's oil and water, and I just took different things that I liked from different people's oil and water. So phase 1, it's really easy. 3 black, 3 red, mix them, I show them, put them down, and they separate. Then I basically do the same thing, but this time it's a bit more convincing. I show each card as it goes down this time, rather than some I didn't show the last time, right? So more convincing, it separates again. People are like, what the heck? And then the third one, once again, it happens in their hands. I do Danny Doherty's oil and water in the spectator's hands, which is super awesome. I think I've done it in one of my Omega Magic videos, but basically I have some cards, they have some cards, we mix them up, and then the cards separate in their hands and they don't in mine. So again, it's just this idea of, for me at least, that I love ending with the magic happening in their hands. I always think that's the strongest way to go. One more example is called a trick I call the deck switch. Not the deck switch, the deck switch. The deck is which, the deck switch, anyway. It's a color changing deck trick, super awesome, super strong. Something I came up with probably not that long ago, maybe like 6 months ago, and I performed it in some of my magic video, Omega Magic videos, some of my Magic with Friends video. It's basically a color changing deck. I have 2 decks, one goes in the box, and phase 1, they call stop, and I take that card and the back of it changes into the color of the other deck. And then they name any card, so it gets stronger, because then I have even more of a free choice. I take that card, it changes. I take the deck, and they visually this time, they see the whole deck change in a quick motion to the other color, and then finally I go like this, and the entire deck has changed into the color of the other deck right in front of their eyes. And then finally they get to open that box and see that the deck that we originally put in that was this color is now changed to the other color that we had out on the table the whole time. Anyway, super strong trick, a lot of kickers in that one, a lot of kind of extra moments. But again, each phase is building. There's a lot of kicker moments, there's a lot of, oh, that was cool. Oh, that was cool. Oh, that was cool. That was awesome. Oh, super cool. They think we're done. Oh no, there's more. Hit them again, hit them again. And that's another thing that I'll talk about, like kickers are really great, kind of giving them the sense that it's over and then hitting them with one last thing. That's another way to get your ending to be really strong, right? So finally, how we end these videos, I tell you how to improve your routine building. So create your own routines. You want to practice, right? The more practice you put in, the better you'll get. Some great strategies are to make your own routines out of classic plots, like I was talking about. So make your own ambitious card, make your own oil and water, whatever. Feel free to take from other people's, but combine different aspects and think about, would this be better to go first, or would this one be better to go first, and build a routine and then go out there and see how it works. But building your own is going to be great. Like I said, I think we should all have our own variations on things. It's just fun, keeps things fresh. Everyone does things differently, and that's what's so great about this. Again, as a quick general point, I don't have any great examples that I can think of off the top of my head, but there are a lot of good books out there that talk about a lot of these concepts that I'm covering, and you can find them there. You can invest. Again, there are even downloads and lectures that talk about this stuff. So go do your research, and if that's what you need, If you need that kind of information to continue to improve, there's lots out there from professionals that will give you guys more details into routine building. Another great option is to just perform and get feedback. Not enough people ask for feedback. Honestly, when I finish a gig or a trick, I always ask the person, what did you think? Or if I have something that I've been wondering about with a trick, I will just ask them, how did you feel when I let you pick a card? Did you feel like it was a free choice? Like, you know, as long as it doesn't take away from the magic, really, I don't mind asking it. Like, I gotta ask the people I'm performing to. They're the ones who are gonna give me the most real feedback, right? So I love just really, you can ask whatever, whenever you perform. Like after you're done, just say, did you feel like this moment was better than this moment? So just get honest feedback. You know, it's really a great tool that I don't think enough people use. Another sort of thing in that same breath is like, analyze yourself every time you perform. Go back to your room at night and think about, okay, what were the tricks I did? I do this every time I perform. I sit down, I think about every trick I performed, and I think what went good, what didn't go well, and then I'll improve. If things need to change and improve, I will do it. If something went wrong, I'll think about why and how I can fix that next time. What went super good, and I'll take note of that. And you can do that with your routining. How did I get better at it? Well, I reflected that, oh, this was the peak, and then later on, we never got back to that point. So that needs to be a closer next time. You know, stuff like this. People don't know how to critically analyze themselves very well, but that's super important, and it's something that's really important in your everyday life as a life skill to work on, is being able to analyze yourself and reflect truthfully and not tell yourself lies either about it. And my final little exercise you can do is, even if you're not performing, as a hobbyist, writing out hypothetical routines. You know, maybe one day you'll even perform them, but writing out, okay, out of the tricks I know, what would I open with, what would I close with, how would I sequence these? Write out a 7-trick little set with one closer, one opener, and then 5 tricks in the middle. Like, that is such a great idea. And then you can even go and perform that on your friends and family to say, hey, I want to try, doing a couple tricks for you guys, do a little set, and see the reactions. You can gauge everything based on people's reactions and figure out if you've done a good job at routining. And it's a lot of fun, and it's great practice. All right, guys, that is it for episode 6, how to make your magic better on routine building. I hope you guys loved that video. This one was a lot of fun. With all of these videos, basically what I do is I write down a little script here. It's just point form of the things I want to touch on, but I always end up going way off and ranting and talking about all these other things, and they always turn out so much better than I expect, because I come up with, I guess on the spot, not on the spot, but more ideas come to me, and I have a lot more good, insightful information than I originally thought I would on these topics. So I really love these videos, honestly. It's just talking, and I like to talk, so it just keeps kind of coming out. Anyway, hope you guys get a lot out of this. I think there's a lot of good points in here, a lot of good tips. Also, the response to that, to my any card, any number, my Soe can, was unbelievable, really awesome. I'm glad you guys love it as much as I do, because it's such a good one, so practical, exactly what I wanted. But anyway, drop me a comment. Let me know what your favorite trick is to close with in the comments below. I would be really curious to hear if you guys are gonna, even if you don't perform, if you were to hypothetically perform, what trick would you close with? What is your really strong trick, your go-to that you love? Some of mine would be some sort of angle 0 or some tort and restored, like I said, or I have a trick called, a new trick I created that I've only performed a couple of times, and it has just been so killer that I am like, okay, this has to be a closer. It's called a character. It's a mentalism trick, really awesome. Some phone magic, different things like that. Anything where I can use other people's props. Those are some of my favorites to close with. Face Off is an illusionist trick by this guy named Ron. His last name's super long. It's amazing, one of my absolute favorite closers. It's a torn and restored that I love to use. But anyway, I will end it here. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell, and I will catch you guys in the next video.